Hi, it's Alistair at Electric Scotland. This is my introduction to the newsletter for 3rd of August 2018. And I have to say that I'm having problems with the website still. Steve has been a lot in hospital. And I've got a page, electricscotland.com/problem1.htm, and in there I've replicated his Facebook post, which is explaining to all his followers about what's been happening to him health-wise. So you might like to read that and maybe understand why I'm having so many issues, because I can't get him to do things because he's in hospital essentially. I've actually paid for the new servers now, so the servers are there. I've just got to get the content over, and that's what the problem is. I can't get the content over because the FTP is not working, and Steve needs to fix that so we can transfer the data over. And that being the case, I also can't post up my what's new, my news feeds on the site either, because again that needs an FTP transfer, and that's not working. And I'm also a bit worried by putting stuff up by other means, that once we've got all the stuff over, which can take several days, it may be that I've put stuff up that we've already copied, and therefore it doesn't know that there's more data to go over. So I've kind of bowed out of putting a lot of stuff up this last week. And I'm hoping by the end of next week that we might have made a lot of progress on that front. So I apologise for the not getting much content up, and obviously for the community still not working, but hopefully once everything's over we'll get all that sorted quickly. And the whole idea of this is because, as you know, we've had problems in the past which has taken Steve a long time to sort. Well, with this new hosting company, if there's ever a problem, it should be fixed very, very quickly indeed, and that's really what we need. So I think the future's great, but it's just getting to there is the problem at the moment. That being the case, I've mostly got news for you rather than content this week, but I'd like to read you an article I read in the Daily Mail today, because it's about Brexit, and I must confess I can't understand why people are so concerned about Brexit. I mean, we just need to come out of the EU and we'll be fine. And I want to read you this article because, frankly, I think it just makes a lot of common sense. So without further ado, let me read you this article. It says, "For those in despair over the lack of progress on Brexit, as our political class trade blows and the entire process becomes bogged down in a quagmire of their making, there is a small corner of a government department that they can turn to for cheer. It is the office of Crawford Falconer. He's the Chief Trade Negotiation Advisor at the Department of International Trade, a man of immense experience in such matters. And in contrast to the doomsayers, his message about Brexit is one of almost unbounded optimism." And that's what we need, some optimism. It says, "Rather than get het up about every scintilla of the negotiating process, he insists on looking at the bigger picture, saying, 'Keep your eye on the end game.' He's convinced that after a period of psychological and economic adjustment to being outside the EU, Britain's fortunes will thrive. He cannot understand why people are so negative about our future, and says the world is begging to do trade deals with us." Some, of course, will scoff, saying his upbeat comments are simply the pipe dream of a pro-Brexit ideologue. But that could not be further from the truth, for Falconer is a man with 25 years of experience in international trade negotiations. He was New Zealand's ambassador to Britain. Although born in Scotland, he was brought up a Kiwi, as well as his adopted country's permanent representative to the World Trade Organization, the WTO. His knowledge of the working of the Geneva-based organization is crucial, considering its role trying to tear down trade barriers, lower tariffs, and resolve commercial disputes between nations. Indeed, the fact is that if Britain leaves the EU without a deal, all our world trade relations will be in the hands of the WTO. Yet his verdict on a post-Brexit Britain could not be more upbeat. The opportunities are enormous, he told the Sunday Times. There are so many, where do I start? In 10 years, maybe even quicker, people will look back and say, oh, why were we so negative about our future? Nor is the optimism dimmed by Mrs May's Chequers deal. He believes that once outside the EU, whether after a soft or a hard Brexit, the government will be much better placed than the doommongers behind Project Fear claim. He says we'll benefit from a change of direction, not least because Brexit has forced businesses to focus on the potential of selling services and goods outside the EU. Indeed, his enthusiasm is so infectious, it makes you think that if he was in charge of Brexit, the whole thing would be wrapped up by now. And far from being pie in the sky, his reasoning is based on solid evidence. The Washington-based International Monetary Fund forecasts that over the next 10 to 15 years, almost all significant global growth will originate outside Europe. By 2020, China's middle class, who are powerful engines of economic growth, will have expanded to 600 million people. And that's just the middle class. India's already numbers up to 300 million, and it's estimated there will be 1.1 billion African middle classes by 2060. These populations, Faulkner explains, will be desperate for British services and goods. The world is the UK's oyster, he says. We produce the best professional services in the world. Our banks are the best in the world. Our insurance companies the most reliable. Our architects, our designers, our lawyers, our accountants, they are world class. We have intellectual property rights to die for. It is these services that the fastest growing economies in Asia and Africa crave. The world is begging for the UK to be able to trade with it. We're pushing on an open door. He sees huge export opportunities in goods, from cars to aircraft wings and foodstuffs. The world is crying out for protein and safe food generally. In East Asia, that's what they want. They don't trust their domestic production with good reason. The UK makes world-class produce. We can now negotiate with countries in a way that's specifically tailored to getting our salmon and our venison on tables. He's right. Even amid the present political stalemate, Britain's exports of professional and financial services to the rest of the world, including the EU, climbed from 36.9 billion in the first quarter of 2017 to 37.8 billion in the same 3 months of this year. As well as being a powerhouse for financial services, Britain is home to Europe's top 4 research universities and dominates in sectors such as popular music, computer gaming, video and publishing. We are world beaters in pharmaceutical and aerospace research. Our technology know-how is envied across the globe, with Chinese, Japanese and American digital firms constantly on the prowl to buy our leading innovative firms. In the past 6 months, Chinese firms have invested 1.7 billion in UK technology. Every businessman or woman worth their salt is fully aware of the opportunities available by exploiting this huge competitive advantage. And Dr. Liam Fox and his Department of International Trade colleagues are determined to do so. Post-Brexit, they argue, Britain can take advantage of all this. Of course, following two world wars, Britain has benefited hugely in economic terms by sharing trade interests with other members of the EU. The fact is that despite Brussels' bravado about the efficiency of single market, EU member states have suffered over recent years because their Brussels rules setters have been too inward-looking. They're obsessed by trade within the EU to the detriment of the potential of wider possibilities across the whole world. In contrast, the Department of International Trade looks outwards in pursuit of the deals Britain must strike post-Brexit. Fox has travelled more than 300,000 miles. He may be mocked for trying to woo trade partners by giving them Union Jack cufflinks, but this ignores the hard work that his senior officials such as Crawford Faulkner have been doing. Their outward-looking drive is vital at a time when Donald Trump has launched an international trade war by imposing tariffs on Chinese goods and taxes on imports, such as steel and aluminium, from EU countries. Indeed, the fear is that we are heading for trade wars on a scale not seen since the 30s. I am not so pessimistic. Too few people realise that behind all his bluster, Trump's goal is not to sabotage the world's trading system, but to spark a new round of negotiations which will lead to tariffs being reduced in the long run. Indeed, his policy is already having success. China and India have lowered tariff barriers in response to his threats. Meanwhile, German car manufacturers have made it clear they want to negotiate tariff-free trade between the US and Europe for motor vehicles. The shape of global trade is changing before our eyes, and it is trade outside Europe that we must encourage. Anyone who listens to those who want the UK to stay in the EU would think that Brexit was a crazy act of self-harm. The truth is otherwise. Ever since the Brexit vote, our economy has prospered. Unemployment is at its lowest levels since the 70s. Freed at last from the shackles of Brussels, what Dr. Liam Fox and Crawford Faulkner want is for Britain to seize the enormous opportunities ahead and for our political leaders to stop all their squabbling. Now I tell you, having read that, I don't understand why we're all not optimistic about the future of Britain outside of the EU. But anyway, that's life. But I just wanted to read that because frankly, it just makes a lot of sense. Now, as to other news, the first story I've got for you is how the Beano survived war and Webb to reach 80. The Beano, now close to publishing its 4,000th edition, the very first issue of the Beano came complete with a few whoopee masks when it was released on July the 30th, 1938. Great article, that. You should read it. Then the next one is a poll. Only a quarter of Brits back Theresa May over Brexit. Some 72% of Britons lack confidence in her ability to reach a good deal with Brussels, the worst rating the Prime Minister has had in the Ipsos Mori political monitor. Her personal approval rating also had a new low over the past month, with Mrs May achieving a net score of minus 32. The next story is the Scots firms transforming our legacy banking systems. Large financial institutions are investing in the fintech revolution, and small, innovative fintech businesses are finding new and exciting ways of delivering financial services. Next story is, should we not be reassessing who we defend and why? There has been considerable mission creep in NATO since the end of the Cold War. It has enlarged far beyond its organic borders. It has taken on roles across Asia and is effectively now the military wing of the West, rather than an anti-communist defence pact. And then one from Think Scotland is how the smoking ban closed Scottish pubs. Very interesting article. That, me being a smoker, of course, I love these articles. Then, Australia just crushed the dream of a free trade deal. The ex-Aussie ambassador has dealt another blow to the PM's plans, warning Britain can't join the TPP while tied to EU rules. And it's time to relearn the geography of British power. The key to Britain's global reach is its acute understanding of networks. So I would certainly recommend you read that one. Then a new flag expert appointed for Scotland. Scotland's heraldic authority, the Court of the Lord Line, has appointed its first honorary vexillologist. Wow. And I might add that if a clan's looking for a clan flag, he's the man to go for. So have a think about that. Then 100 Scots reveal why they left their home country behind. The voices of more than 100 Scots who left their home country during the 20th century in search of a better life have been recorded in the first project of its kind. Little progress made in improving the diet of Scots in the last 15 years. So little progress has been made in improving the diet of Scots over the past 15 years, new research has found. And quite frankly, if you look at all the money that's spent on trying to get Scots to eat better, it's been a total disaster. And clearly the people that run it are the ones that have lots of money, middle class probably, doing well. You know, they don't understand the problems of a lot of the Scots, and this article really kind of portrays that. Then an interesting one, map shows 400 British Army camps in Scotland after Culloden. That's 400. The document has been drawn up following analysis of a 217-year-old handwritten cantonment records held in the Library of Edinburgh Castle. I mean, that's just amazing how many camps they had to put us down after Culloden. Australia's drought is like a cancer eating away at farms and families. The worst drought in living memory is sweeping parts of eastern Australia, leaving farmers struggling to cope and many of them asking questions about the future. Terrible. I've seen stuff on the BBC about that as well. It really is terrible. City of London slashes Brexit job loss estimate. The UK financial services sector could suffer as few as 5,000 job losses as a result of Brexit, according to a new estimate by the City of London Corporation, far lower than the industry had initially feared. Then a world trade deal under WTO rules is now the best option for the UK. That could hardly be the case since their examination of the available evidence about trading under WTO rules been anything but exhaustive, expert and disinterested, as we will see in a moment. Basically, it's commenting on the fact that the Treasury are really a lot of liars. They've just come out with total misinformation for years now. And we can't trust them, as simple as that. That's pointing that out to us. The next one is Japan backs Britain joining the Trans-Pacific Trade Group. So after Australia says we can't join if we stick with EU, it just reinforces the fact that Japan would back us. But I guess we couldn't be in the EU to get that. But that's a massive fact. It says Japan today backed Britain joining a huge Trans-Pacific trade zone after Brexit in a boost for the UK's hope of signing new deals for exports. I mean, it just goes to show there's just more and more great news out there in the world. So why are we so pessimistic about leaving the EU? I don't understand it. Then the final one we've got is patriotic, optimistic and a world expert on trade deals. I'll give you the link. That's the story I read out for you at the beginning of this newsletter, but you can read it for yourself if you click on the link I've provided. Then Electric Canadian. I've only got two items up, Engineering Journal and Canada and its provinces. I've added an extra volume to both of those. And in Electric Scotland, I've got up the last of the Commonwealth of Australia. It's volume 19 from July 1837 to January 1939. and also Best Newfangled Family Tree. I got in section 1 of the August 2018 issue. So that's it. And the story is actually part 2 of what I gave you last week, which is the Scottish Highlander. So part 2 is quite big and takes up about 2/3 of the newsletter, I might add. Long story that, but hopefully you've been enjoying reading it and having a think about it all. And that's the newsletter for this week. So hopefully next week I'll be in a position to give you much better news, but it kind of depends on Steve giving us proper access to our data. So we'll see how that goes. So there you go. That's it for this week. And as I say, the problem with the PDF file is that I might have problems getting it over to the server, but I'll do my best. And if I can get it over, I'll give you a link under this video. Okay, well, nice talking to you again, and I think it's the Labour weekend coming up in Canada, so that's quite a long weekend holiday for us here. I think my friend Nola's coming down for a night or two, because she has to come down to do some research and stuff like that, so she said she'll be looking in, maybe spending a night with me. Okay, well, anyway, there we go. Talk to you next week. Cheers.